Hello, everyone. Today we are making it happen with the one, the only Miss, the incredible Taylor Rooks. Thank you so much for being here. How are you today?
I am amazing. Thank you so much for having me and for that very kind intro.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So here on the show, we talk about, navigating through the sports media industry or any sports industry in general as a Black individual. But you've not only had that boundary, but also being a Black woman. Can you talk a little bit about what it means to be a Black woman and be so successful at where you are in your career right now?
Yeah, I think it means everything. As a Black person and as a Black woman, I feel such a major responsibility to all people who look like me, to be in this space, to talk about things that matter to us, to use the platform in a way that resonates with all of us. I want Black women to see me, and I want to always feel very accessible and relatable to Black women. I never want to feel distant from anybody that looks like me, because we really are all the exact same. We're all so special in the exact same way. It's just about figuring out what that thing is for us, and also understanding that so much of life really is opportunity and work and being ready when those opportunities present itself. And I don't want Black women to feel like they are disadvantaged because they're Black women, because even though the world is going to tell you that and society is going to tell you that, there is so much strength to draw from your Blackness, from your femininity, and I don't see those as obstacles. I really try to focus on all of the good that has come from me being both of those things. But it certainly means a lot, and I definitely recognize that it's important to always stand in that Blackness and never shy away from discussing topics that are important to my community, because it's really like the number one community that I care about.
Absolutely. Now, to have this platform, you've obviously had to work extremely hard, and it's hard to work without the passion, and clearly you have a passion for what you do. So talk to me a little bit about where that dream and that passion started for you to be in the sports media industry.
Yeah, honestly, it really started with just loving to talk. I love to talk to people. I like to meet new people, and I grew up in a sports family. So it's like very embedded in everything that we do. I don't really know life without watching games with my family. But I also only like to do things that I'm good at. And I knew I wasn't going to be an athlete, but I knew I could talk about it. So just kind of from there, I always was like, could I do this? I had moments in my life where I said, okay, I'm going to go here and I'm going to major in business and see if maybe later on I'll try and fully attack it. But when I got to college and I was kind of looking around at everybody else doing it, and I just thought to myself, okay, no, I can actually do this. Right. So I kind of just put pedal to the metal and dedicated to just becoming a broadcast journalist, my freshman year in college, and haven't looked back since.
Absolutely. Now, when you started and you got there, did you know that, did you have the specific, I want to do sideline reporting, I want to do anchoring, or was it kind of just, I want to tell the stories and see where it takes me?
Well, that's something that's really interesting about, life and just journalism too, is your passions change. And I think that your skills change, and learning what you're good at and bad at is a constant progression and evolution too. So when I first started, I thought, okay, hey, I want to be on a desk. And I want people to tune in, and I want to tell them what happened that day. To me, that's what journalism was. And for a little bit, that did feel purposeful to me, and I did feel fulfilled by that. But then the more I kept doing it, I thought, no, I want more of a voice. I want to be talking to people a bit more than I was. I wanted more of a responsibility. So then I started doing hosting, anchoring, silent reporting. And even then that wasn't enough. I was like, okay, I want something more, something that's mine. So then I started a podcast at SNY. And that was when I said, this is the thing that I want to do. Journalism doesn't just have to be sitting at the desk and saying this person lost, this person won, this person had a good game, this person didn't. There's so much more than that. But, when I was coming up, that really was the main type of journalism that you saw. Now it's cool that, there's content, right? There's people that have blogs and are making an impact. There's people that have podcasts or vodcasts that are all a vital part of the media space. But I had to keep working within this field to understand that really journalism is what you make it. And now I'm really happy. If I had to describe what I do, I wouldn't really say host, reporter, or anchor. I would simply just call myself an interviewer, because that's what I'm doing majority of the time. My show is based on long form, sit down interviews, and there's not that many, I mean, not even just in sports, there's just not that many things that focus on these long form, sit down type of interviews. So I say all that to say, I think when I started, I was like, I want to sit at a desk and I want to anchor. But now it's definitely interviewing and hosting. And I've really lived in that for quite some time. I can't really see myself going back from that.
Absolutely. And what some people may not know is you also are an extremely talented writer. When you were in the bubble for the playoffs, you talked about your experience and some of the experiences of the players with GQ. What was it like to be in that bubble and just really realize you were a part of history?
It was wild. Like I tell people all the time, I mean, hopefully, I hope, COVID doesn't get worse, so there's no need for it ever again. But I always say, if for some reason there's another bubble, like sign me up, I'd go. It was the coolest, just journalistic experience to be in the thick of like one of the most important things that was happening in sports, like this bubble, so many things are brewing there. It was, we're in COVID, it was social justice. And then of course there were also games going on. So it was just wild that every day we woke up in this place that was so hyper focused on so many current issues all at one time. And it was really cool. I said in the article, it was literally like summer camp for the greatest athletes in the world. And I just think all of us that were there as media members, it was just really nice to be able to tell stories in a really unique way. And there was such a finite number of us in that bubble that could even tell those stories. And for the rest of time, there's only a finite number of people that could even say what it was like to be in the bubble. So it certainly kind of felt like a little sorority fraternity of people that lived in Disney World for 2 months.
Now, did you know that like going in there, okay, I'm going to write this story, or did, you just have all the experiences and say, people need to hear about it. I want to tell that story.
Yeah. So I kept on thinking, this bubble is insane. I want to make sure I record everything that I can and write about it when I can. But I didn't plan on writing that for GQ. They actually approached me and said that they were doing a mini of the year issue, and they thought I was the only person that could write this article about the bubble in a way that was personal, both to me and to the athletes. And I was like, sure. I mean, I hadn't written a long form piece in so long, but I actually started out writing. So it's like, okay, I'm going to give myself grace and time to write this piece. And I'm really happy that I did. I was super proud of it. It won one of the best sports writing of the year awards. So I'm really happy that they reached out and that I was able to do it. And it made me want to write more. I always tell young journalists, I think the key to like asking good questions and the key to being good on camera is actually good writing. So I would encourage everybody to really work on their writing skills because it translates to everything else that you do in media.
Absolutely. When do you think you did the most writing? Was it in college? Was it once you graduated? When do you think that skill really formed for you?
It was certainly in college. In college, I was like writing once a week. Right. But then you get into the world of TV and it's like you're writing a lot, but you're just writing your scripts. Mm-hmm. And, script writing, although foundationally it's the same, it's obviously not the same as like telling a story for a print piece. So I was definitely having to wake up some muscles that had not been flexed in a long time. And they eventually woke up. But so there's certainly differences in the style of writing.
Right. Now, you mentioned about the social injustice that was happening while you were in the bubble. And I think that this is something we've been talking a lot and like throughout my classes and everything. As a journalist, you're expected to talk about these things and to, be in the know. But before you're a journalist, you're also a Black woman. How do you make sure you're taking care of your mental health while, saying what you need to say on your platform while seeing all of these types of injustices every day?
Yeah, well, I think in a lot of ways, and this isn't every day, but a lot of the days, it's good for me to talk about it, right? And to talk to other people about it and tell those stories. I think in a lot of ways it makes you feel like you're not alone. You know, if I'm talking to Fred VanVleet or DeMar DeRozan or Malcolm Jenkins or Matt Barnes, you know, about their experiences as Black people, you know, on a platform and content that's going to be shared, I think I find a lot of, I think maybe a lot of hope and a lot of relatability, being able to show others that like other people feel this way. Doesn't matter how famous you are, how rich you are, how good at basketball or football you are Black and you're having to deal with these things every day and then still go out there in front of the public eye and put on this face. And I think it's really important to check in with these athletes and these sports figures, because too often, you know, we see them as only that. And I think that the beauty in the stories is really when you're talking to them about who they are. And it's really hard to talk to someone about who they are without first starting with the fact that they are a Black man or a Black woman. And I think it's good to always have that at the forefront. And so having those conversations really is, you know, self-care for me in a lot of ways. That does help my mental health too. Other things that I do, I love to read. Like I said, I love to write. I journal every day. But I think the work is very important. It makes you feel like having these conversations in some way is making a difference in someone's life. And I just try to keep my eye on that.
Absolutely. Now, what do you think has been one of the more, how you feel, important pieces that you've done, whether it be writing or, you know, a long form interview? What do you think after you were finished, you felt fulfilled and like, you know, you were doing your part?
Yeah. So like in the midst of George Floyd, I did this series for Bleacher, and it was called Redefining. And I interviewed, I think, 4 people. Yeah, 3 Black athletes, 1 white athlete. But the thing that every episode started with the same question, which was, when did you realize you were Black? Right. And so it was really interesting to hear these different experiences that people had about when they said, okay, like people are seeing me as this Black person. And then the last question I asked everybody was to define America. And so having just like these different viewpoints and perspectives and being able to tell that story, I thought was really important, especially at that time. And I remember that same year I read this book by Tiari Jones. It's called An American Marriage. And at the end of it, she has this essay. And she said that it's really important that we tell stories about people and their problems, not problems and their people. And I felt like a lot of journalism was coming out at that moment. It was about like, you know, racism, right? But it wasn't about like the actual face of the racism, the people that have actually lived it all the time, in ways they don't even realize. Like there's no better way, you know, to actually show how it affects others and to talk to a Black person. So to hear DeMar DeRozan talk about how uncomfortable he felt when he went to college because he had never been around that many white people. Right. And like, that's not something that he had ever really been able to discuss. Like he was so uncomfortable that he could not live on campus. Right. You know, and then you kind of juxtapose that with somebody like Malcolm Jenkins, and his answer to the question about knowing he was Black was that when he was younger, he knew it because he actually went to an all Black like elementary school. So a lot of times when people are looking at Black people, they see a monolith, like everybody has had the same experience, but everybody's experience was different. So I enjoyed that series because we got to show different Black experiences. And even though there's so many things that connect Black people, there's a lot of things that separate them too. And I think it's important to discuss those too.
Absolutely. Now, you talk about, you know, these pieces that you've done, and a lot of your work, just like a lot of work anyway now, is being broadcasted on social media, as well as that, you know, that's where we're seeing, you know, all of these horrible videos of things happening or the terrible comments that people are making. How important or unimportant, if you feel that way, do you think social media is as a tool for journalism?
I mean, I think as a tool for journalism, it is like paramount. it's how all of us get information. I mean, the fact that like I have my phone right here, I know anything that I want to look up, I can probably just go on Twitter and people are talking about it.
Right.
But it's so much less to me, I think, about the news that you can get on social media and more about the opinions and perspectives that you can get on social media. Like, right. It's important to see things outside of yourself sometimes. So I like knowing, okay, why this person feels differently about it than I do. I think that healthy discourse, that healthy debate is actually the number one kind of priority or advantage that social media has. I think that's why it's really, really important. In terms of journalism, I say this all the time. I owe my career to social media. I don't think that I would be able to do any of this if it wasn't for Twitter or Instagram. That was really how things were able to take off for me. So I'll never have anything too bad to say about social media. Though it is absolutely the best in people and the worst in people. And I don't think we should get that caught up in social media, but it is an important tool, absolutely, for anybody that's in media.
Right. Now you touch on the best and the worst. A lot of people, being a Black woman, being a public figure and a journalist, Black women themselves tend to think that they can't be who they are. Everybody has an opinion on what a Black woman should be doing and what a Black woman shouldn't be doing. How have you been able to, carry yourself on, not necessarily caring what other people think, but more about what you think and, tips you would give to the younger generation?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I always tell this to any young woman that is doing sports journalism. I think it's so important to not read the comments and not care about comments. And I know that's much easier said than done for a bunch of reasons. One, you always want to see good comments, right? You want to see people like your work. They thought you asked a good question and that this content was good, and all that is great and important. But I think that if you get too caught up in the good, it's inevitable that you'll get very caught up in the bad. Right. Because if you're only wanting to see good comments all the time, you will feel very personally affected by somebody who doesn't have a good thing to say about you. And there's always going to be a person that doesn't have a good thing to say about you. And you just have to keep that balance of knowing that really the good doesn't matter and neither does the bad. You have to care about the work, and the people who actually have to care about the work, they have to think it's good. Whether that's your producer, your director, your peers that you work with, the people with the credentials to have an opinion, right? That's who you want to feel a way about the work that you're doing. You can't get too caught up in the peanut gallery that's always going to have something to say. And then that's also the other thing I've learned is there's always going to be something to say. And you can't base your social media presence on that, on wanting people to agree with what you said or like what you posted on Instagram. You just have to be you fully and completely. And that's not a thing that happens right away. I think when I first started, I cared very deeply what people thought about my work and thought about me. When I lived in Chicago and I had my first job out of school, I was 22. I would rush to the internet after I did a show. Right. I'd feel people were adding me. I would search my name. I'm okay, what'd they think? Then maybe 2 years after that job, I said, this is insane. And this is not a way that a person can live. And now I don't care. But I just say that to say that's not a skill that I think everyone needs to have right now. Nobody had that skill immediately. Your life is moving so quickly and you feel like you have to be so in tune with what people think of you. And that's not true. But just give yourself the grace and the time to understand that there's other more important things. And the more that your work is good and it resonates with people and you're making news and creating news and telling good stories, everything comes from that. I just don't want young women to get too caught up in all the other stuff, because being caught up in all that other stuff really takes away from the stuff that matters. So you need that perspective.
Absolutely. Now you've had some time to, learn and, learn stuff like that. And you're able to give advice to the younger Black women in the industry. Now, if you could go back, like you said, 22-year-old Taylor, what would you give her what advice would you give her knowing what you know now? I'm sure there's a whole bunch, but if you had to pick one.
There's so much. It's number one, break up with that guy. No, I'm just kidding. I don't
think you're wrong.
I would say say, I mean, I think it's sort of what I touched on, but just like, it's okay that the lane you want isn't created. Like, so when I was in college, you know, your professors will preach a lot this path that you take, right? Like you graduate school, you start in a local market, and then you go up to another local market. And then eventually when you're like 40, you get to be national. And like that feels like the thing that they tell everybody. And I don't really think journalism should be taught in that way. Because every time they say that, I'm like, well, I don't want to start in a local market. I want to get so good in college that I don't have to do that. And I think it should be tailored to the student.
Right.
And so I would just say, don't think that all the paths that have already existed mean that that's the path that you have to take. Because for a minute I did think that. I was like, okay, I'm gonna work in like Kentucky and then eventually get good enough to go somewhere else. But I do believe that if you just like, if you're in college and you keep working hard at that thing, you can create that own path. When I was in school, there was not a person doing the thing that I do now, like just interviewing people. So I hope it's always like that. Like, I hope that when you're my age, you're doing a thing that no one was doing right now. Like, I think it should be this progression of like, okay, especially with the internet, you can create whatever job you want in media. And I would just encourage myself to keep on kind of trucking in that direction.
Absolutely. Now, thank you for that advice. I think that's something that everybody needs to hear, because you're right. That is what we're told, you know, start out in a small market in the middle of Nebraska. And then maybe one day when you're 40, you might get to where you want to be.
Yeah. I don't think that's the way to encourage students. And again, there is absolutely nothing wrong with working in a small market.
Right.
No way, you know, bashing that path. Some of the best journalists right now are in small markets. Like, all of that is a vital part of the media landscape and structure. But I also believe that college students, they have an idea of what they want and what they want to accomplish in life. And they're also starting to understand who they are. And if you have that self-awareness and you also have that ability and that clarity and that passion, then there isn't a thing that should be stopping you from making that jump instead of just like, you know, that hop. It's okay to dream big and try to attack that thing. And that is what should be preached in college. And really that's in any career. That if you have the ability, you should absolutely go for it.
Absolutely. Now you are accomplishing things you never really thought you would accomplish. Not to say that you didn't know you would accomplish them, but like you said, you're doing things that weren't a thing, you know, when you first graduated college. So what is something on your goal list? With the top of the year, when you're writing down your goals, what is next for Taylor Rooks?
What is next? I mean, I've been definitely talking about how I want to do a podcast episode, like with a live audience. I think that'd be really fun. So hopefully I can do that this year. And I think, like, you know, in the next 5 years or so, I want to have a long form talk show where I can interview anybody, which the podcast is like that. But I just like want to be able to interview politicians, athletes, entertainers, like whoever has something to say. I just like want to go into that vein of having real conversations with people, even if it's like not a famous person, but it's somebody who has a story. The more and more I get into this career, the more I'm like, the thing that I really like the most above all else is just sitting down one-on-one with a person. And I don't think that we do that enough. And you get so many journalistic skills from doing that. Learning how to ask a question, learning how to ask a good follow-up, making them feel comfortable, making the interview natural, having good pace with the interview, knowing topics to hit. Like, there's nothing like walking away from an interview and like knowing it was a good interview. And so that's a feeling that I want like forever. So that's what I want to be doing in the next, 5 to 10 years.
Right. Now, what was one of those interviews you finished and you said, yes, that was good?
Most recent one was definitely my one with Candace Parker. I was really proud of that interview. I felt the same way with the Allen Iverson interview, with Darren Waller interview. My first, like when I was doing Take It There, I loved that DeMar DeRozan interview. I liked the Jimmy Butler one, but it's really cool. Like when I think back to those interviews, I think back to now, there's so many things in those Take It There episodes. I'm like, why didn't you ask this? This was a great follow-up. You really missed out. Like, I would do that now and say, oh my God, this was not good. But I think that's a part of, you know, work and progression. You're like, okay, well, what I did 2 years ago, what I'm doing now is much better. And I always want to feel like the thing I used to do was bad, because I want to keep improving so much that everything is bad eventually. But now, like I said, I was really proud of the Candace Parker one. And it was just good. I think we had good rapport. I had good follow-ups for her. She revealed things. I feel like that's really the mark of a good interview, is when somebody reveals something that you didn't really know about them. And I felt that way about Candace.
Yeah, I thought, like you said, the Candace Parker interview, getting her to, or not getting her, she felt, obviously, you're great at your job. She felt comfortable enough to, you know, talk about USA. And, you know, Allen Iverson, that's somebody, you know, me being from Philly, I was like, wait, we get to hear Allen Iverson like really talk that talk. So it was super cool as a Philly girl to hear, you know, that side of the story. But thank you, Taylor, so much for being here and sharing your wisdom and some of your stories with us. Greatly appreciate it. And for everybody, we'll see you next time.
No, thank you for having me.